So, last week we dove into how creative the Berserker class is. They've got this thing called Mad Enhancement, basically trading sanity for raw power. It's why so many of them are completely bonkers. Each Berserker's madness is a little different too, making them all unique in their own chaotic way. But this time, I want to call out another class that's honestly just as unique, maybe even weirder. Yep, I'm talking about the Rider class, the Mount Masters. Servants in this class are the ones who, in life, rode something significant. Whether it was a living creature or some man-made vehicle. And sometimes, even legendary animals themselves get summoned as servants. What I'm really highlighting here, though, is their rides and the crazy setups they have in battle. Now, Rider is the class that's all about using their ride to move fast. Each of them has their own specialty when it comes to agility and speed. The most classic example is Iskandar, aka Alexander the Great. He's a heroic spirit who rides a massive ox chariot that boosts both his speed and power. Every time he heads into battle, he's on that chariot, fully set to wreck things. To me, this is like the standard template for a Rider class servant. They're built to travel far, move fast, and fight at full power with their ride. But it seems like the devs and writers are really into this class because they've given it some serious creative freedom. You see, Rider class is known for using their mounts, but ironically, they often end up fighting without them. This is because one of their quirks is that many of them actually have multiple noble phantasms, or weapons, like Astolfo and Achilles. Their legends are about a lot more than just riding, so it's not unusual to see riders going solo in battle. A classic example? Medusa. Sure, she has a Pegasus, but how often does she actually use it? Most of the time, she's fast enough on her own to pull off stealth attacks with impressive speed and distance. She typically fights using a weapon that's like a metal spike on a chain. Honestly, if we were masters in a Holy Grail war, it'd be tough to recognize riders at first glance since so many fight like this. Another example is Ushiwaka Maru. Ushi's technically a rider, because as a young military commander, she rode into battle on horseback. But in most fights, she barely even touches her horse. She's all about her sword skills, fighting with insane agility, jumping around, gliding, and even doing Kagebunshin no Jutsu like it's nothing. Her noble phantasm doesn't even involve her horse. It's funny, while Iskandar rolls out with his chariot and the entire army, Medusa rams her Pegasus. Ushi goes full sword dancer mode, combining lightning-fast moves with some intense acrobatics. So yeah, she's still a rider, and definitely fast, but we rarely ever see her fighting with her mount. This is basically the same deal with Achilles. Sure, in FGO, Achilles has a noble phantasm that uses his chariot, but if you check him out in Fate Apocrypha, he seriously looks like he was made for the Lancer class. He's all about that spear, moving and fighting exactly like a Lancer. Take his final showdown against Atalanta, for example. He charges straight at her, piercing through in a way that looks just like a Lancer's noble phantasm. Except, it's not. It was just a normal thrust, boosted by Achilles' ridiculous speed. But hey, just a heads up, I'm not saying all of this out of hate or anything. I actually find it all pretty amusing because this class setup is so unique, and I never thought we'd get something quite like this. It's like this whole riding concept is just getting stranger and stranger. At this point, I want you guys to see Ozymandias. Honestly, I'm confused. What is he actually riding? A sphinx? I mean, he has them, sure, but it's more like his familiar, not something he rides. I'm pretty sure he's riding a pyramid, but how does that even work? It's such a cool concept, though, because in Camelot we get to see that the pyramid is actually this massive four-sided spaceship. And that's not all. He even fights using cannons that fire from the sky. Absolutely wild. Like, I know at this point, thinking of Ozzy riding a pyramid is basically just him riding a giant spaceship, but my brain just can't handle the sheer craziness of this rider concept. And then we have other weird cases, like Red Hair, who's this half-human, half-horse creature. His face is a full-on horse, by the way. So technically, Red Hair isn't riding anything. It's just himself, since his body's already part horse. No extra mount or vehicle is involved at all. He even fights with a spear-like weapon and also a bow, which is, well, interesting. Might as well be a lancer or an archer. And don't get me started on the time Fenrir, the massive wolf creature, got summoned in the Holy Grail War, as a rider no less. A giant, beastly wolf is classified as a rider. So in cases like these, who's actually riding who? Speaking of strange, there's an even weirder take on the whole riding concept. In Fate Strange Fake, there's this super unique rider servant whose actual form is a pathogen, or more accurately, a plague itself. This rider isn't even close to human. No physical form, no thoughts of its own, no inner monologue, and definitely no vehicle. It attacks by infecting its enemies instead. It's honestly wild, because this attack style doesn't line up at all with the typical rider, using swords or spears or all that physical weapon. But what's even more confusing is, where's the riding concept in all of this? I mean, how does it apply? According to the material book, this rider, known as the Pale Rider, has a totally different take on riding. Its vehicle is more of a sphere of influence. It rides on the wind, on humanity itself, and even on the world around it. To be honest, I don't even know what that means. But honestly, I'm not gonna argue with it because, in my opinion, these unique concepts are seriously awesome. I feel like they really show off the depth of the literary ideas mixed with magecraft in the Nasuverse. There are still plenty of writers who push the whole riding concept as thin as possible, like Ivan, who rides himself, or technically, his mammoth body. Then there's Rhaenys, who rides Mercury, and Sakamoto Ryoma, who, well, rides his own partner. But honestly, all of those still feel within reason. They're quirky, but just enough to make you smile. But this one, I don't even know what to say anymore. Queen Maeve is classified as a rider because, well, in life, her legend revolves around riding men. And no, not like riding on a battlefield, more like riding in bed. Yeah. When I first found out, I let out a long sigh, like I was just done with everything. Maeve herself even claims she's a rider because she rides men. Anyway, how exactly does that count as riding? Even her noble phantasm visuals imply the same thing. After digging into her profile and researching more about her, I came to the conclusion that this is totally just a cheeky joke from the developers who designed her. To me, Maeve's concept of riding has a few different layers. First, it's worth noting that Maeve was a queen, a noble, but also a master manipulator. So, riding could mean dominating or controlling men, because she's cunning and always uses people for her own benefit. If you didn't know, she's actually the woman who started the Ulster War over wealth, so that definition of riding fits her personality perfectly. Then, there's the more sexual meanings. She rides by having intimate relationships with lots of men. According to her legend, she had many lovers from kings to warriors. And finally, it could mean she's a rider in a more traditional sense. In her lore, she actually did have a bull-drawn chariot she used in the Ulster War. But that battle was a low point for her, with so much sacrifice to win, and there's even a story about her bulls fighting and killing each other. So maybe she's embarrassed to claim that legend and her chariot as her ride, and instead tell people what she's proud of. Her ability to ride men and spread her charm around. This trolling by the developers probably the same with Anne Bonny and Mary Read's whole concept. Just because they're pirates, they're classified as riders. It feels a bit forced, honestly. Until my dirty mind thought, maybe the joke is that they're riding each other. If you know, you know. I could keep going on and on about the unique quirks of different riders, but it'd be boring if I was the only one talking. What do you guys think about this class? Don't forget to subscribe, guys!